friends, and thanks for listening to Moon Tower Soccer. On today's show, we're going to share the latest in Austin FC news, and we're also going to talk about the first game we got to see live, which is La Copita versus Houston Dynamo. And then later on, we're also going to share an interview that we did with our new colleague at the Striker, but old friend, Phil West, with some 2021 MLS season predictions. My name is Landon Cottom, and I'm joined as always by Mr. Jeremiah Bentley.
Hey everybody, I'm Jeremiah Bentley. Landon, we did a live show, or I guess kind of. We did a live tweet thing on Thursday. How'd you feel about that?
It was fun. It was kind of a little test. Neither of us are social media gurus, but we're gonna try to find some ways to kind of bring some midweek content every once in a while. And so I think we'll probably do some more of that. But it's also, there's so much to talk about these days that our show notes end up way too long and we don't get to talk about half the stuff. So it'll be a fun place to get to talk about some of these more fun topics that we don't have time to do in the show anymore.
Yeah, I feel like that's a good spot for me to have like really strong opinions that I don't necessarily want to be recorded for forever. Yeah. So if I want to trash certain local restaurants and I'm not excited about, I can just do that on Twitter live and then it's kind of gone.
Yeah. How is you also, to follow up on a Twitter joke, a joke from the last episode. You had a Four Loko during the Twitter live stream as well. How did that go for you?
Yeah, it was awful. It tasted like regret and bad decisions. So it was a Four Loko Gold. So we had that show. I took with the boys to see Godzilla versus King Kong that night. I couldn't drink that whole Four Loko because it was 14% alcohol and I would not have been able to drive. So I put it in the refrigerator after like 3 drinks. And 5 days later went back and it tasted exactly just as bad as it did before. So it doesn't age well. But then one thing I also noticed is that according to the can, that is 4 servings of Four Loko. So you should only drink 6 ounces at a time. If you look at the nutrition on the back, which I would agree with after experiencing about 4 ounces of it.
It's I think alcohol and volume wise, it's like drinking an entire bottle of wine, which is an entire bottle of very bad artificially flavored wine, which is not a good idea. But I'm glad you survived and that you made it through that experience.
Me too. I feel like it did a good job of cleaning out the drain with the second half of the can, which is where the rest of it went.
We're going to talk about the first game of La Copita versus Houston. We were both out of town for it and weren't entirely sure how we were going to get to watch it because they kind of had geo fences around where you could watch it. I think you end up using some maybe questionable methods to be able to watch it.
I did. I used what was ahead of me. So I managed to watch it through. Well, I don't know if I want to give this away. Never mind. I found a way to watch it. I found a way to watch it using my laptop. Did you?
Yeah. So I was in Houston actually. So it's our 3-year wedding anniversary, and so we took a trip to the faraway land of Houston, Texas, and just went to a bunch of museums, which is really nice. But because I was in Houston, I was geo-fenced for the Houston feed, and I was kind of thinking I was going to end up like listening to Glenn Davis or someone call the game on the Houston feed, but they ended up actually just playing the Austin feed on the Houston Dynamo website. So I still got to listen to Adrian Healy and Michael Lahoud, and so that was really nice to get kind of the same experience. Before jumping into the game, what did you think of kind of the broadcast experience with Healy and Lahoud?
Well, now that I know that, I managed to convince my computer I was in Houston, so I watched the exact same feed that you did off the Dynamo website, and I had the same worry. And Glenn Davis is awesome and like a wonderful person and a really good announcer, but it was good to hear the dynamic, and I feel like they sounded really comfortable. I mean, I knew what to expect out of Adrian Healy, but I've never heard Mike Lahoud, and I didn't. They just seemed to fit well together.
Yeah,
they had good banter. It wasn't like the first time they'd ever sat in a booth for a live broadcast together.
Yeah, totally agree. I thought if you'd have told me that this was the first, I mean, and I think they did some UT games earlier this year as well. So not the absolute first, but they haven't been doing it very long together. So I think they're only going to get better from here, but a really strong start for sure. And having watched some regional broadcasts of MLS games, I think we are extremely lucky to have these two guys that are going to be calling those games because they're pretty good at what they do. Let's jump into the game. So Austin ended up losing 3-2 to the Dynamo. What were your overall impressions of the game, Jeremiah?
For me, so I think it just reinforced a lot of what, for the most part, especially to the negative side of things, like it reinforced the thing that I was worried about the most, and a lot of people were worried about the most. Because I know we're not supposed to overreact to like the first preseason match, but the concern about the center backs and like whether we have two quality MLS first 11 level players there, I think the outcome like made me even more concerned about that was before. But to the good, like the fact that we seem to have a lot of depth and attack and can threaten from everywhere with a bunch of different players, including some guys that came on and only played 20, 25 minutes, I think sort of also reinforced that general impression that we have. So I think for me, that's what it seemed like. It's just our strengths, the perceived strengths and weaknesses going in still continue to appear to be our strengths and weaknesses. Do you have a different take on it?
No, yeah, I agree with all that. And I think a lot of some of the finer points that I wanted to make will mostly come up in talking through the goals of the game. So let's before we get into running through the major events of the game, let's go through the starting 11. So I actually nailed it when we picked our 11s with Joe Lowry. It was exactly the 11 that I picked. So Tarbell in goal, Ben Sweat at left back, Beasler and Romagna at center back, Lima at right back, Alex Ring at the 6. And this is in a 4-3-3. So Ring at the 6, Pochettino and Pereira at those free 8/10 roles there. Then Cecilio, Husin, and Redis along the front line. We were kind of waiting to see exactly how they would play that 4-3-3, but it was about how you'd expect them to. There was not a lot of weird stuff happening with those fullbacks, like tucking in or anything. You would see Ben Sweat occasionally. If Cecilio was staying out wide, you would see Sweat occasionally kind of move inside as we were building possession. But for the most part, the fullbacks were overlapping fullbacks, and the whole team was pushing pretty high in possession. So you'd see Beasler and Romagna past the halfway line, kind of as part of the build-up and attack and as part of the possession play. So for me, that part of it was exactly what I thought it was going to be. And then you would see Pereira and Pochettino kind of float out wide as the ball was on their side. And so if you've watched a Berhalter men's national team game, it's a lot of the same tactics, offensively and defensively, I felt as well. So we were counter pressing. When we lose the ball, we would press pretty hard or on like a restart, but then it wasn't like a New York Red Bulls type of full on press all the time. It was just in kind of key moments pressing, but for the most part with a fairly high block and then settling into like a mid to high block whenever they were building up in the attack. But so were you surprised, or was there any part of the starting lineup that you were surprised by or interested in?
No, it's honestly, I wrote this question in the outline so that you could take credit for getting all 11 right. That's the whole reason I had it in there. I wanted to serve that up for you.
Thanks, Jeremiah.
So you did a good job
I
on that.
appreciate it.
No.
Yeah, so I think now let's just kind of go through kind of the events of the game. So early on, Houston was pressing us pretty aggressively, especially on restarts. As we built in possession and kind of moved up the field, they settled into like a pretty condensed block there in their own defensive third. But then on restarts, or if we were starting deeper in the field, they were pressing us really aggressively. And we did not always handle it super well. I think there were probably 6 or 7 major defensive collapses that could have turned into goals. And only 3 of them ended up turning into goals. It could have been more for sure. And the first half ended 1-0. It could have been 2-1, 3-1 if Houston had a few breaks go their way, or if, like, they had finished off plays a little bit smarter. But that one goal by Austin, which was in the 16th minute, was a banger. It was amazing. Tomas Pochettino took a free kick in the 16th minute, and it was, I don't know. How do you describe this goal, Jeremiah?
it was like watching a video game. I mean, like the keeper guessed right. It was just, he placed it in a spot that in a spot with a curve on the ball in like two different directions that there was just no defense against. It was amazing. I'd call it Messi-esque. How about that?
Yeah,
that's the best description.
As close, it was top right corner. Keeper had no chance. There was no way the keeper was ever going to get to that, and it was like as close to both posts, like the crossbar and the right post, as you could get without touching them. But it was really nice, and so the game level footage. It looked really good. It looked like a really good goal, but then Austin FC had some like the more artistic field level stuff for some of the highlights. And there was an angle from directly behind him, and you can see the swerve on the ball and the keeper diving and like how close it gets to both posts. It was an extremely impressive goal. So really good start for Pochettino there for sure, but it didn't continue to go as well. There's some good offensive moments in possession, but there's also a long stretches where Austin couldn't keep the ball in the attacking half. They would get pushed back pretty deep and would win the ball back and then lose it almost immediately. So kind of that transition from defense back into attack wasn't always there. There wasn't always options for people, which will lead to some of the stuff we're going to talk to here in a little bit. But yeah, it was still some highlights there as far as the build up and kind of combination with the midfielders moving the ball around, but long stretches where we struggled to do anything really. Is there anything else you wanted to point out in the first half there?
No, I think that was good. I feel like Tarbell had a lot better first half than second half. You know, that he was one of the he helped in keeping it from getting too bad in the first half. I don't know if he just got worn down or the communication sort of fell apart or whatever, but I feel like it was a totally different game from him between the first and second half.
Yeah. So moving on to the second half, there were no changes at halftime, which is something that I was interested to see, like how much rotation were they going to go for? Both teams sent out the same 11s in the second half. I think it was the 54th minute when Houston scores their first goal. So it was, I was watching the replay and I don't remember how this actually happened, but a loose ball ends up kind of getting dinked over the back line from the top of the box. And Romagna turns and is chasing it. And he probably could have just put a foot in it before it bounced, but he lets it bounce and Pico sneaks through and gets on the ball. And then Tarbell is coming out towards him. And then Romagna is also running towards him. And then Pico somehow gets it past them and just kind of like the ball just slowly rolls into the goal. I think Pico is trying to hit it hard and kind of scuffed it, which may have been some of the misdirection, but there should have been some better communication there. Either Tarbell should have called off Romagna so he could really charge at it, but both of them went for it and neither of them got there in time to actually do anything about it. So not great there. I think it was 2 minutes later, the second Houston goal where, let me make sure I'm getting my goals.
Yeah, that's that one.
Here.
That was the one where Beasler,
He
just kicked the ball straight into one of the guys for the Dynamo. I don't remember who.
It was Vera, I think, the defensive midfielder. But it was one of the many moments where Austin was playing the ball out of the back, and they looked very dedicated to doing this, right? Like anytime the ball was deep, even on like goal kicks, sometimes they were playing it short and we're going to play it out of the back. I think Beasler ended up kind of running way out wide. Ring gets it like at the top of the box and passes it to Beasler way out wide, which means there's nobody in that center back position that Beasler just left. Beasler tries to one touch it up the line to Sweat, but it ends up going directly to a Houston Dynamo player. He settles it, crosses it into Urruti, who is standing where Beasler would have been in his normal positioning. And he was wide open. Urruti one times it, and it was a really nice finish by Urruti, kind of a blind turn one-time finish, which a really good finish, but he was in a lot of space in the box with nobody near him. So even if he would have had time to settle it and take another shot and take a shot there if he wanted to. I think in this one, so this is a moment where I wanted to bring up an observation. We were talking in the striker Slack group with Chris Bills, and he brought up something, and I was like literally typing the exact same thing at the exact moment. But I think he wrote it in his article about this for the striker, and then talked about it in the MLS Striker podcast. But he mentioned Greg Berhalter in his early days with the United States national team was just like telling his team, play out of the back no matter what. And even if it's a bad idea, keep it on the ground, pass it out of the back. And was like doing it to the detriment of the good of the team. Like they lost games because of that. And I think it was a way that he was going to like just put these players under pressure, throw them in the fire and say, okay, fight your way out of it now. I got the feeling that Wolf told the Austin players that same thing on that day, that regardless of what's happening, how bad the position you're in, play it out of the back. You're going to pass it out of the back. Just to kind of get used to doing that, to do it in situations where you wouldn't normally be comfortable doing it. I think Matt Besler is an experienced enough player that under normal circumstances, when Alex Ring plays him that ball and he's way out of position and knows that there's a big hole that he just left behind him, he kicks that to the moon. Like that ball doesn't touch the ground again. And I think in this circumstance, because of how they were playing that whole game, just always keeping it on the ground, I think he tries to one touch it to Sweat because of that. Besler is the kind of player that he knows what to do in that situation, right? So that's something that kind of brings me a little bit of comfort with this game, is that they are doing things to kind of push themselves out of their comfort zone, that whenever we're playing LAFC or we're playing in actual competition, I think Besler skies that ball. I think he kicks it to the moon. So I think, again, not a great play, but also something I don't think we should read too much into. The next goal was in the 71st minute. Ring is kind of pushing the ball forward in the midfield, loses the ball. The ball falls to Urruti, who turns and very quickly plays it kind of blindly. And Besler had actually, as Ring lost the ball and it fell to Urruti, Besler charges forward to put Urruti under pressure, and which was, I think, the right call in the moment to keep a quick counterattack from going. But Urruti turns very quickly and just launches it, just knowing that Fafa Picault is super fast and that he's hoping that he's going to beat whoever's there. Cascante was pushed up pretty high and was tracking Picault, but Picault is always going to win that foot race. Picault beats him, runs around the edge, is one-on-one with Tarbell, ends up megging Tarbell for the goal. I think in that situation, there's a few things that could have been done better, but Cascante needs to just foul him, right? Like, he just needs to, even before Picault gets on the ball, he should be able to look back and see that, like, okay, Besler charged forward, I'm by myself. There's nobody else here. He should have just put a shoulder into Picault while he's trying to win the ball. And if he gets the ball and they don't call anything, great, it's ours. If they call the foul, great, ball stops and we get to restart. So I think that's a thing that I don't know. I think Cascante's experienced enough that he should know better than that, but I would imagine he'll be putting in a tactical foul in that situation the next time it happens to him.
Yeah, I would hope so. He was surprisingly slow. I mean, I guess I knew he was slow, but he was really slow on a couple balls. I was surprised
by that as well. He looked, that play specifically, he did not look like he was moving super well.
Yeah, you did miss one goal before that.
Oh, did
one.
I?
Yeah, we had a brief moment of hope.
Oh, yeah, in between those, yeah.
Yeah, we were down 2-1, and then, like, honestly, both of our goals were beautiful, and that this, in a very different way, was a really good goal, because it was sort of the upside of this system. And it was the one where, Ring was, your defensive midfielder is way downfield, right? And put a shot on goal that the keeper blocked, but kind of made a mess of. And then Rodney Redis' diving header was like beautiful. Just his commitment to realizing the situation and as an opportunity and making that happen and not trying to do something else, but just like going all out effort to put a head on the ball when an open net, I thought was amazing.
Yeah. It looked like an easy finish, but it was not. Like, it's one that he should have finished, but it was not a super easy one to do. The ball was moving pretty quickly and he had to react pretty quickly. And he did great, reacted really well, put his head on it and stuck it in the back of the net. But I think the build up to that goal was encouraging as well. I don't remember if it was a corner or like some type of restart over in the Austin's left corner there. But there was some like nice, I think it was a short corner. It was,
as all their corners were. Every corner was a short corner.
Were they?
Right?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Every single one of them. Yeah.
I didn't notice that, but yeah, now that thinking back, I don't remember any long balls in. Even like kind of the non-shot free kicks were some type of like misdirection, or like several of them were kind of touches into another space for another kind of cross. But yeah, Pereira and Ring kind of combined to get Ring into that spot where he was, and nobody closed him down. So he pushes into that space and hits the ball super hard. And like you said, the keeper stopped it, but it was moving too hard and kind of had a knuckle on it, that there was no way he was going to catch it. And so, yeah, the keeper just does his best to put a body on it, and it falls to Redis for that goal. So yeah, that was definitely a bright spot. Sorry for moving past that. I guess I'm being too pessimistic today.
That's fine. That's fine. So who impressed you? Or I guess I'm mostly interested in like who impressed you that maybe outside of what you were expecting. Like who was really, really good, or who was really, really bad outside of what you believe would happen.
Yeah, so I think the ones that we like believed would happen, I think the only one that I was like absolutely sure was going to look really good was Alex Ring, and he did. Like, Alex Ring was running the game when he had the ball in the midfield, and then put out some fires defensively as well in transition. He kind of chased some balls back and put them out for corners when they were in pretty dangerous positions, and cut some stuff out early. I thought Pochettino looked solid for the most part. That goal was great, but I think also just in kind of possession and build up and connection, he was solid. I thought Lima was solid. Again, I talked about last week how I wasn't entirely sold on Rodney Redes yet. Rodney Redes looked good. We saw all of the work that work rate that he showed at Guarani, but not really contributing a lot to the attack when he was back at Guarani. He did that today. He showed some really smart movement, got on the ball in some dangerous spots, was in the right place at the right time for that goal, and reacted well for it. But I thought he looked really solid. And then, is there anybody else that I'm missing that kind of stood out that looked good?
Yeah, for me, there were two of the subs that looked particularly good, and one was John Gallagher. He really made a difference in his 25-ish minutes.
Yeah, something like that.
He looked a lot more dangerous than Houston did. Maybe it's because of service for Houston or whatever. That he didn't look that way, but he was a threat. He was working hard. He was running hard. He seemed like a guy that was like wanting to impress the coach and win a position, which is awesome. And I thought Mane was a lot of the same. Late in the game when we were down 3-2, I think Mane showed some really good ball skills, and he had a good shot that had it gone slightly differently, he could have drawn the game at 3-2. So I was really impressed to see what he had to offer too in the attack. So I think that shows the kind of depth that we have, that they could come on late and make a difference, and hopefully they'll be able to do that during the season too.
Yeah, I think we end up talking about this with Phil West in the interview, but Mane, I'm really excited to see what Mane can do is off the bench. He's a really busy player, dribbly, fast, and I think he could really do some damage to some tired legged defenses late in games. So yeah, that was encouraging. Talking about Gallagher, so Gallagher came in at the 9, which is, I think in the preseason games we had seen him on the left wing in some of the little highlight reels that the team had released. We knew he could play the 9. He played there for Atlanta some last season. But I was kind of surprised to see him be the first option off the bench. But the reason that is, he was playing the position pretty differently to how Houston was doing. you would see Husin drop in really deep to pick up the ball sometimes to kind of start the play, like the build-up play in midfield. He would go so deep that he was receiving the ball from a center back sometime, like around midfield, and then would turn and play it to a midfielder and then run back forward. Gallagher was stretching that back line. There's a few really dangerous balls in behind that players played to him. And so I liked having that option of speed running in behind. As far as like the normal number 9 stuff that Husin is almost definitely better than him at, having someone like that, just like that speedy option to stretch the back line, I think that's a good option to have. So I thought, yeah, I agree. I think he looked pretty good. What about
I was going to ask who looked worse than you thought, and I think you probably started to answer that question.
Yeah, so Cecilio, he didn't necessarily even look bad. I think early in the game he didn't get on the ball very much. They were playing the ball up the right hand side more times than not. Pochettino and Pereira ended up switching sides at one point, and I watched for a while to see if it was intentional or if they just happened to end up there, but they stayed on the switched sides for a long time after that. So I don't know if they were trying to change some things up to get one of them on the ball more, to try to get Cecilio the ball more, but he didn't get on the ball very much at all. And then when he did get on it, it didn't really get a chance to do anything useful. Wasn't in very useful positions, and then sometimes just didn't really do much with it when he got it. And then later in the game, I think he ended up coming off, like, he was one of the later subs. But I feel like he was trying to like maybe force it a little bit and trying to like bring the game to himself a little too much at that point, because I think he knew he had kind of a disappointing game and was trying to push himself upon it a little bit more, which is, again, it's also not a super encouraging thing to see, because I think if this team's going to be successful, it's going to be based on Josh Wolf's system. If he's trying to put together this system team, if we have a player who's kind of just going to do what he wants to try to make this work, maybe that's not the greatest thing in the world. It's very early. And there was a lot of disjointed things in the attack. Like you said before, Husin, I don't know that he got the best service. I don't think there was not a lot of really cohesive movements in the front, in the attacking part of the field. So I'm not going to judge him too hard for that. Same with Cecilio. I'm not going to judge him too hard. It's a new system. He's his first game against MLS competition. So it's not a super encouraging sign from him, but I'm also not going to say that he's a complete wash yet. I think we're very far from making any kinds of judgment like that yet.
Yeah, I think that's very true. And for me, when we talked about Cascante, being surprisingly slow, and like Romagna, I mean, he was kind of a mess, but it's his first MLS competition period, and he showed some of the things that we liked about him, and showed some of the things that we're worried about, and I don't think that was out of line with expectations. Going back to Cascante and Romagna, Romagna played whenever Houston was pressing high and putting that back line under pressure. Romagna played some really sloppy balls out of the back that ended up turning over. And I mentioned the 6 or 7 collapses that happened. Romagna was responsible for a handful of those on his own, just from kind of sloppy passes under pressure. So again, new system. He's not played in this kind of system before. So hopefully that's something that he can pick up and do better, because he does have a lot of skills that are going to be really useful in this league. But if he can't play the way that Wolf wants him to, then it doesn't really matter. Yeah, that's true. So I wanted to add or transition to the Houston perspective. So pulled a quote from our colleague Victor Araiza about the Houston Dynamo offseason, because if I'm your average Austin FC fan who just watched us sort of crumble under pressure to the team that was the last place team in the Western Conference last season, I might be a little bit worried. So do you want to talk a little bit about what Victor had to say about the match and why we maybe shouldn't be quite as stressed as we are? Yeah.
So reading Victor's article, and then also listening to the MLS the Striker MLS podcast, whenever the Houston lineup came out, I was thinking like, oh, this isn't necessarily their best 11 coming out right now. And after listening to Victor, he kind of thinks that it could be like maybe there's one of the center backs he thinks will end up not being the guy, and then maybe Tyler Pasher on that right wing ends up losing a spot to someone. But for the most part, he thinks this could be their starting 11. So I thought that was interesting to see. But then I think something that I've noticed is that the two guys that hurt us a lot were Urruti and Pico, who are two new additions to that team. Also, two guys who were really dangerous in this game on the counterattack. And that was with us pushing so high, and then also being so dedicated to playing the ball on the ground out of the back. It was, I think it was just like a recipe for disaster that Houston was able to take advantage of and punish us for.
Yeah, we played their strengths, and I mean they're gonna be better for sure. They've had a really strong offseason, and I don't know how much better, but if you're looking at an expansion club that's never taken the field before, against an improving side, hopefully that's some piece in that. And on Wednesday we'll have a chance to really evaluate everything that we've talked about so far, and maybe have a whole fresh set of opinions for next week's show. Show. So for what's up next in La Copita, which we're currently, I think we are 3rd out of 4. Is that right? I think we're doing better in San Antonio.
That should be right. 3 out of 4. Yeah.
Yep. So we'll be on the road in Frisco, playing FC Dallas. Sorry, is that on Thursday? I wrote Thursday.
It's
and
Wednesday.
Now I'm less confident. Wednesday. Okay. That's why I should read my own notes. Yes. On Wednesday. Yeah. And FC Dallas got a strong start, taking in San Antonio FC 5-1. So, I mean, do you have any early thoughts on that, or should we just wait and see what happens?
Yeah, I have no idea. I think one thing that you wanted to bring up talking about Josh Wolf's pre-match press conference is that he mentioned last week in the press conference before the game that we would get to see a lot of players, right? Because they have unlimited substitutions. I think we saw 7 or 8 subs in this game against Houston. Do we think we're going to see the same starting 11 against Dallas?
I don't think I think we will see a different starting 11 against Dallas. I mean, there's a couple spots where another competition where I would expect to see something different. Like I would like to know what the Beasler Cascante looks like from the start, right? That seems like a logical one. I feel like there's an open competition between Tarbell and Stuvers, maybe Stuvers in goal. As far as forwards go, it's the up the field. I think we're pretty well set. So I wouldn't expect to see those to change. But what do you think about that?
No, I completely agree. I could see a couple of spots getting changed out. Center back being one. But I also think like this isn't a standard preseason thing. Josh Wolf is trying to kind of settle these guys in together. I would expect to see most of the same starting 11 just so they can get reps. They can kind of practice some of the stuff they're working on. They'll be able to watch film of this game versus Houston and kind of correct some things, and then get to go out and put them into practice against Dallas this week. So I would honestly expect to see most of the same starting 11 with the spots that you mentioned specifically. I think center back who's going to play next to Beasler there, and then depending on how close the competition is at keeper, if Josh Wolf actually thinks that Stuver or one of the other guys is pushing Tarbell for that starting spot, I could see them playing the other one there. But if Tarbell is the favorite right now, I could see him leaving him in just to get more reps with that back line and have them get more comfortable together.
Yeah, that makes sense. And especially if it's like a change back line and Tarbell's the guy, then you want to let him see what he looks like in front of everyone.
Is there anything else about the game you want to cover before we move on to some of the notes from the press conference last week?
No, I think we looked at it, in depth. I look forward to seeing the next one and being able to react to that. And again, continue to be really excited about talking about soccer.
Yeah, and for Jeremiah, tell me if we shouldn't talk about this, but we've heard that the replay of the Houston game should be available online at some point.
We've heard that there are plans to make it available online at some point.
Okay, and then
it seems fairly likely, and I'm sure whatever happens there will be the same for the Dallas one, but do not expect to see San Antonio anywhere.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So if anybody missed the Houston one or is not going to be able to watch the Dallas one live, we're hoping there's going to be recordings put out sometime. We'll find out soon enough, I guess. Let's move on to briefly touch on a few points from the press conference last week. So a lot of Josh Wolf's portion of it was leading up to the Houston game. Is there any highlights we want to touch on that before we move on to the player portions?
I mean, yeah, we hit on the one that I think probably really matters. So I think we could spend our time talking about what Sweat and Redez said. And we talked about this when we were preparing, but like 90% of Redez's interview was in Spanish, which is, so I was completely lost, but you were following along and had thoughts on it. And then I'll kind of cover Sweat. So what order do you want to do those in?
Let's do Sweat first, and this is one that I actually haven't had time to go back and watch because I was out of town all week. So I'll ask you questions about it. What were your highlights about the Ben Sweat part of the press conference?
Yeah, there were a few things. One, it's just like everybody in all the press conferences, a lot of good stuff about the St. David's Performance Center. So I don't know if they're all, being paid by the compliment or whatever, but we don't need to talk about that too much. But, he talked about the style of play expected from the defenders, which we saw in the game on Saturday, which was, everybody's involved in the attack. Everybody's involved in moving the ball forward. So I think they lived up to expectations on that. And I thought, for me, the most interesting part of it was because he was an expansion draft pick for Miami last year, right? For Inter Miami?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
And then also for Austin this year. And so they asked him to compare. I think Phil might have actually been the person who asked him about the two experiences. And one of the things he mentioned for Miami was that they had, because of COVID, they had a lot of trouble like gelling as a team. And, even now, even given, COVID hasn't ended, but we're still, we're still in that, but just the opportunities that they've had to work together have made a completely different experience as opposed to what he had in Miami. And so he had a lot of good thoughts about the way that we were going to be able to build a culture in Austin and what that would look like. And then the other part of that was him sort of embracing this role as a veteran who had been around the league a lot, who part of his job was to help younger players sort of understand the league, understand like the importance of training, understand where they fit in. And so he really seems to be embracing that role as this kind of wily, while still being a starter, but also like embracing the role of being this wily old veteran who can help make the team better. And that's good to hear because, we've heard that there's a lot of those kind of glue guys on the club, and we talked about some of that before, but to hear yet another person talk about that and about that being their role, I thought was really cool.
Yeah, and I think I did see one quote in writing from him on that same point, and I think he was talking about Kolmanich, who is going to be competing for his spot, right? And yeah, he said like I welcome it, like I'm happy to have him here, and like I want to show him the ropes, and it really is cool to see him embracing that and encouraging that healthy competition and saying like I'm going to show you the ropes, but you have to prove that you're going to beat me still. And so I think that's really cool. Anything else from the Ben Sweat part?
No, that hit the key points of Ben Sweat. So let's talk about Redis a little bit.
All right. So I think it was someone in the Paraguayan media that put together kind of like a supercut of all of his answers in Spanish, and I watched through that.
Was it Roberto Rojas? I think he was on the call.
I can't remember if he's the one who put the video together, or if he retweeted it or something. I don't remember, but
okay,
it may have been Roberto.
I'm pretty sure he was in it. Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, there wasn't a lot of like new information about it. I think my main takeaway from his portion of it was just how much energy he has and how much personality he's showing. If you've followed any of the players on social media, you'll see Rodney doing like funny little dances and like making funny faces. And following him when he was in Guarani and like early days here, he always came across to me as kind of a timid, shy guy. And he seems to be showing a lot of personality and a lot of confidence. And yeah, just watching him do that press conference, he looked like a veteran. Like you wouldn't have guessed he's a 21-year-old kid doing it. He spoke with a lot of confidence, seemed very sure of himself, had a lot of energy, showing some personality, which yeah, it's just something I haven't seen from him. So I was just really happy to see that come out of him. And then I think that showed in the game the other day. He was playing confidently, making some runs in behind, demanding the ball at times, looked a little bit upset with Nick Lima when he didn't get it. So I think it's really encouraging to see him kind of coming into his own as a confident player.
Yeah, and he scored in every match so far, right? He had one versus OKC, one versus Louisville, and one today. So he's definitely lighting it up.
All right, yeah, let's transition to that interview with Phil West. Again, it's become kind of a tradition to have our how would you describe Phil's relationship to us and to our podcast? He's like a incorrigible uncle.
That's a good. That's good. He's always gonna have a take. There's gonna be some bad puns, which he did even on the live stream, I believe. So yeah, he's a constant figure around Moon Tower, soccer, and every other version of this podcast.
We love Phil. We're always happy to talk to him. So we're going to take a quick break and we'll be back with Phil West. Moon Tower Soccer is once again brought to you by our friends at FVF Law, the official injury lawyers of Austin FC.
FEF is a different kind of personal injury law firm dedicated to community, transparency, and client education. And they are also currently in the Austin Chronicle poll for best lawyers. So, Landon, how does one navigate toward voting for FEF Law for that?
If you go to vote.austinchronicle.com, you can find all kinds of categories to vote in. There's restaurants and all kinds of businesses and services. And if you go to the services category and then click on lawyer, they're one of the choices for best lawyer. So go in there, vote for FVF Law because they're good people and we like them. For more information about what makes FVF different and why understanding your legal options can dramatically change the outcome of a case, you can go to fvf.law. Once again, that's fvf.law. Well, you don't need words to tell me things that drive me wild, right out of my brain. All right, our guest this week is Phil West, who's a writer for MLSsoccer.com and the Striker Texas, newly of the Striker Texas. Phil, thanks so much for joining us, man.
Yeah, no problem. Glad to be here. And yeah, I'm with the Striker now. Ta-da!
Yeah, yeah, it's exciting to have you on the team now. I feel like, Phil, we've had you on the podcast that we've been hosting, whatever the podcast may have been called at the time has probably changed every time. But I think this is probably the third year in a row that we've done like some sort of MLS preview with you at the start of the season. So we got to keep it going, right?
Yeah, and sure. And I was going to say last year was, I think, one of the last public soccer things that I did when we all got together at, I think it was Oscar Blues, and sat at a very windy picnic table. And I made a very bunch of bad predictions that I'm glad that people are not bringing up now, because certainly you're not going to go back like 5-6 months and pull up old tape of what I say here today and share that with people.
Never. I would never do that. And remember, we had like one microphone to share between the two of us that I was having to pass back and forth. So the technology has gotten a lot better for sure.
I actually
in podcasting days.
I listened to that episode the other day and I remembered having to like edit airplanes out of the show, and it was like a stereo microphone that you guys were sharing, and so like one of you was only in the left ear and one of you was in the right ear, and so it was weird. But this is going to be hopefully better audio than that was. But yeah, let's, like I said, the goal of this is kind of do a little bit of an MLS season preview. Last season we didn't have a team to actually preview, but this season Austin FC is going to be in our predictions. So maybe let's start off with your predictions for the teams who are going to make the playoffs in each conference, and maybe to make it the more exciting conference last, let's start in the East.
Yeah, for sure. And this was really tough. I mean, again, this is something just kind of strikes me more and more about the league every year, is that you can make a case for so many teams, not all teams, but most teams that are in MLS right now, to actually make the playoffs, even with it being a little bit more narrow. I mean, last year, obviously, we had the expanded post-COVID playoff structure where we had 10 teams in the East, where, virtually almost everybody got in, which is, why you had Inter Miami getting into the playoffs and then hitting the reset button like immediately after. And then you had 8 teams in the West. So, but yeah, this year it's 7-7. So it's a little bit more competitive. And of course, Austin is team 27. So just a little over half of the teams get in. So yeah, really, really competitive. And it's going to be, I think, especially in those like kind of 6 to 10 areas, I think it's going to be extremely competitive, and matches towards the end of the season are really going to make a big difference. So, oh God, they're right at the top, and I don't want to say their name, but the team that rhymes with Columbus Brew, I think, is going to be number 1 in the East.
Yeah, I completely agree. They are absolutely stacked. The Brew are, and they were a really good team last year and have only added stronger pieces and have gotten deeper. And so, yeah, I agree with that one as well.
Yeah, I think Kevin Molino is going to make a big difference for them in particular. So yeah, and then number 2, I've got New England, which I think might be surprising to some people, but you kind of got to see towards the latter part of the season and in the playoffs what Gustavo Bou and Carlos Hill can do when they're healthy and when they're up to speed and when they're connecting. And Bruce Arena, I mean, say what you will about him, but he's a veteran coach. He knows how to win an MLS, and they looked really good in their playoff run, and I think that's going to kind of continue.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I put them 3rd on my list, but yeah, I think they'll be pretty strong again this season as well. What about it? Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. So 3 and 4, I'm kind of waffling back and forth because it kind of depends on new acquisitions and the new coach for one of the teams. But for banter purposes, I have Atlanta 3rd and Orlando 4th.
All right. Yeah. My top 4 are just a different arrangement of all of that. What is the coach that you mentioned, you're talking about Hainsey, and you're just not sure like what he's going to look like, or what's your concerns there?
Well, just coming into MLS, I mean, it's an adjustment for any new coach, as good and accomplished as the coach might be. And Heinze looks to have really interesting ideas, and maybe not necessarily bringing them exactly like they were under Tata, but maybe a lot closer than they were than say in the Frank de Boer or the Stephen Glass era, right? So, and then Orlando, I kind of wonder what Nani has left in the tank, but I don't even think he's like their most important player. I think Pereira is. I mean, obviously, it doesn't look like Daryl DK is going to be back for them, but I think they've still got a lot of people who can score for that team and a lot of chance creators. And of course, in Rodrigo Schlegel, they have one of the best goalkeepers in the league. So
they also added Alexander Pato.
Who
I'm guessing will maybe start at the striker position. So I was thinking about them. I was a little bit concerned. I really like this Orlando team, or like the Orlando team of last season as well, which is fairly similar this season. And I was originally thinking about, I was like, oh, they don't have DK, so I'm not sure if they're going to be as good this season, but adding Pato, and maybe he can make up that slack there as well. And then I think I can't remember the guy's name, but I think they've strengthened in the midfield, added another midfielder. I can't remember his name right now, but a lot of their strongest pieces are back minus DK, and they've kind of added some depth pieces in as well. So yeah, I actually picked them 2nd. I don't really have a good reason why, but
yeah, they didn't actually use DK a lot of the season either. So he didn't really get slotted in, as I remember, till like maybe mid-season, and didn't quite look like the DK at Barnsley. So he was definitely getting there. He was showing signs of that, but just what he's done over in England in the last 2 months has been pretty incredible. So
All
yeah,
right,
he's not coming back.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if he was back in MLS. So for those last 3 spots in the East, we want to make sure and spend some time on the West, where Austin FC is going to be playing. So who are your last 3 spots in the Eastern Conference?
Yeah, and this was real tough, and I'm gonna change up on the fly here a little bit too. I will say the Union 5th. I will say Toronto 6th, and then I'm going to say it's between NYC and Nashville for the 7th spot. And I think, NYC will probably pull in somebody from the City Football Group network, and they would edge out Nashville for that last spot. But again, I think it's real competitive, and I've got like DC in there. I've got the Red Bulls in there, even like Chicago, and then I think that there's kind of a discernible drop off for the last 3 spots in the East. But it's real close in there. I mean, it's going to be something, I think, where every game matters.
Yeah, I think what you were saying about New York is spot on, just because if you're talking their rosters as they sit right now, I would pick Nashville over them, but I don't necessarily expect Nashville to bring in any more players. Whereas New York, I can almost guarantee they're going to, and just the right player could kind of change the trajectory of that team. Yeah. But yeah, I had a hard time picking those last couple of spots there as well. Jeremiah, did you have any different picks in the playoffs there?
No, I was really surprised going through this about how competitive everything is there, So I wouldn't change much more. I mean, just overall, if you think about like Chicago, seems like they've gotten better, but still, like when you look at the teams in front of them, like where's the path for them? I even think a little bit Atlanta. I'm not as high on Atlanta. I think for recovery as y'all are, I put them a little lower. I mean, I still think they'll be a playoff team, but the competitiveness of both conferences has been surprising to me because there's not a lot of gimmies other than Cincinnati and maybe Montreal, right?
Yeah, and even Cincinnati, I mean, they brought in some interesting players. I mean, it's conceivable that they could make it click and have a little run and get past some teams and then all of a sudden get into playoff position. But yeah, I mean, they were wooden spoon 2 years in a row. So, you can only go up from where they're at, but how much more up are they going to go? It's kind of a big question there.
So nobody thinks that Miami's going to turn it around this year?
See, and that's a tough thing too. I mean, what is Phil Neville going to be like as a coach? Players that kind of underperformed last year, are they going to have bounce back years? They still have a really talented squad, obviously, but what are they going to do with that talent? And can they be cohesive? And can they surpass some of those other teams that might be, a little bit more cohesive?
Yeah, for sure. That'll be interesting to watch, but let's move on to, like I said, the conference that we're going to be watching a lot closer, the conference that we're going to actually be watching a lot more, just because Austin is really only going to be playing teams from this conference. In the West, who do you have up top, Phil?
I'm going to be boring again. I'm going to say LAFC.
Yeah, safe choice, right?
Yeah, they're just so loaded. They're incredibly talented, and they brought in some players that should help their back line this year, which was kind of a question mark for them last year. And yeah, they're super talented and came really close to winning CCL, this past year. So certainly they've got the talent to do those things. And then I've got Minnesota second, and I want to talk about them a lot actually, because I have them as my pick to go to MLS Cup. I think they're going to vault from the playoffs. And a lot of that has to do with Bolo Reynoso. They're number 10. I guess I would, there may be better kind of all around number 10s like Pozuelo and Ladero, but I would say that Reynoso is the best pure number 10 in the league right now. In the playoffs, he had 1 goal and 7 assists in 253 playoff minutes. So like if you extrapolate that out for a full season, it would just be like absolutely ridiculous numbers. And I don't think he's going to quite keep up that pace, but he's really fun to watch. And he was amazing in the playoffs. And, they were 20 minutes in a weird collapse against the Sounders from getting to MLS Cup last year. And they've got this new Ramon Abalagai from Boca as well. It's a striker. They've got Patrick Way, cousin of Tim, who's coming on as an 18-year-old homegrown. I mean, they just look great. And then Portland, who I think actually could make some noise in CCL, starting today, guys. Starting today, right. CCL fever. Yeah, I think Portland's going to be really good as well. That's my top three, and then I think there's a bit of drop off after that. So any thoughts there?
No, I did LAFC, Portland, Seattle, Minnesota fourth, but
okay.
Again, like I think 2 to 6, I wouldn't be surprised if any of those teams finished anywhere really. And yeah, but Minnesota. So going back to Minnesota for a second, are you not concerned with losing what Molino brought last season?
I am, but just kind of seeing Way in the preseason, maybe they can make up for that. I just think Reynoso is so good. I mean, again, this is a caveat. I mean, last year I was super high in Atlanta, and Joseph Martinez injured his ACL in the very first game, which kind of rendered that prediction moot and useless. So, and I think Joseph and Reynoso are the two kind of single game changer players in MLS. I think if you put them into a lineup, they make their presence felt more than anybody else. And I think if they, if they don't have those players in, you definitely will have a drop off with those teams. So I think that those are the real keys there. I had Seattle fourth, by the way, as well. I mean, I think they're going to miss Jordan Morris quite a bit, but I do think that they're going to be right there.
Yeah, mentioning Seattle, I think they're the kind of team that last several seasons have not looked great at the beginning, but turn it on whenever it counts.
Oh yeah.
And so I could see them not being great and like taking some time to kind of replace those pieces that they need to and fill in those gaps, but then turning it on at the end. And so that's why I picked them a little bit lower down as well, and wouldn't be surprised to see them get fourth or fifth, but then end up making a deep run in the playoffs still.
Yeah. I mean, they didn't look great down 2-0 in the 70th minute of the conference finals.
Yeah.
They scored 3 goals in the last 20 minutes and got themselves into MLS Cup, and then did not look great in MLS Cup, unfortunately. And then, so number 5, I have SKC, which I think good, solid team. A lot of that is going to depend on Polito and just how healthy he's going to stay, and just how they're able to adjust to the changes. Obviously Matt Beasler's come over. They weren't using him as much last season in the back line, but, obviously veteran leadership, that's a big deal. I'll be curious to see. I mean, they've still definitely got, of course, the talent to make the playoffs. And
so I've got, before we go, I have one bit of Seattle trivia that I did not know until I was looking at this earlier. And that is Seattle has finished in the top 4 every year since 2009. So I feel really good. And saying that no matter what, to your point, like they will find a way, even with Morris being gone, to be in the top 4. So I had the same top 4, and then I had KC in 5th also.
That's like Arsene Wenger levels right there.
Yeah, just giant puffy jackets on the coach, no matter who he is.
You're speaking my language.
All right, let's getting into the business end of the playoff spots. Who do you have in your last 2 spots? You've gone through 5, haven't you?
Well, yes. And for banter purposes and a particular import to people listening here on this podcast, I have Austin FC 6th in their inaugural season, and then I have FC Dallas 7th.
All right.
And I have the Raps just barely missing the playoffs in 8th.
Jeremiah, does that fit with yours? Who do you have in those last few spots?
So I have Colorado 6 and Austin 7 and Dallas just outside of it.
So
send your angry tweets to Jay Bentley ATX.
Well, I just wait until you hear my picks.
Okay. Let's get yours.
I had been saying that I was expecting Austin to finish anywhere from 5th to 9th. That was kind of the range that I was giving them. That was before we saw the game the other day.
Just one game, dude.
I can't in good conscience say, and you're right, it is one game, and we're going to talk about that more in the rest of the show. But for my last few spots, I have Colorado 5th, Sporting Kansas City 6th, FC Dallas 7th, and I put Austin in 8th.
That is so heartbreaking.
So
it hurts me to
no.
do it, but I was digging through these other teams, and I just looking at what these teams have done, either what they're bringing back from last season and building upon, or bringing in some new pieces. I don't see I don't see Austin being better than 7 of these teams.
Yeah, I think that's going to depend on, Dominguez and Pochettino's ceiling now. If they end up being really, really good, if they end up being, I don't think either of them will maybe be like starting 11 like in the league, but if they're kind of that caliber, if they're kind of like fringe all-star players or better, then I feel like there's enough talent and enough coaching there to vault them. And I think if they're going to come on, I think they're going to come on later in the season, obviously, when they have more home games, when they've had more of a chance to learn the system and to get acclimated and comfortable with one another. I mean,
you also mentioned bringing on extra players. There's still that one DP spot to fill, which could totally turn things around. And you only need to be good for, was it Sam Jones when was on the other week saying you only need to be good in MLS for 2 months, really.
Right.
And so,
yeah, and Alex Ring was saying that. I mean, I think they're kind of relishing this idea of dark horse. Maybe we can come on late and do this. I mean, I don't know that they're saying that out loud, but maybe that's what kind of the feeling is if they can just hang and learn with the system and get points and stay relevant and stay in the hunt, and they can really make that late season push and then get into the playoffs. And then, who knows what happens in the playoffs, because again, it is wild and wonderful, and it's very, very hard to go back to MLS Cup, even let alone win it. Which is why I think that the team that rhymes with Columbus Brew, as good as they are, will not repeat, just for that fact. I mean, it hasn't happened since the Galaxy did it in 11 and 12. And I mean, they went back and won it in 14, obviously, as close to a dynasty team as we've had in a while, count the Sounders, right? But it's really tough to come back, just with the playoffs and the competition and just with the level of teams in both conferences. I mean, I think, LAFC, they have to get there, they have to prove it. And for Columbus, they have to return with everybody just kind of looking for them. Got New England, Atlanta, Orlando, Philly, all those teams conceivably could get into MLS Cup.
So all the hate mail that you were going to send to Jeremiah for picking Dallas ahead of us, you can send to me for not picking us to make the playoffs. I think you already gave us one of your MLS Cup picks, but who do you have going to MLS Cup, and who do you think will win it?
I mean, the East, I'm still kind of hemming and hawing. I mean, a lot of that is just going to depend on Joseph and how well he's recovered. I mean, if he's back to full Joseph, then I think Atlanta gets in there just because he wills that. But again, we don't know what the new players are going to look like. I mean, obviously last year, the DPs that they had in there did not necessarily do what they wanted them to do. So, I mean, obviously it's going to be big test for them this year. I think New England's got a really good shot, frankly. And so Minnesota, New England, which I think will be a cold MLS Cup either way. And I would say at that point that Minnesota, I mean, if Minnesota is going to get to MLS Cup, it's because Reynoso is going to have an MVP style season. And so I would expect him to do electric, incredible things in MLS Cup and win it for them. And, if it's home, there's Wonderwall, and, be a pretty special moment for them. I think it'd be, pretty fun, pretty entertaining to watch. But my heart says that, Austin just does the double, right? So wins US Open Cup, little redux to, Chicago Fire 1988 expansion team that did that. I believe that was a Los Verdes trivia question, because Andrew Urban was asking me.
That's right. Yeah.
Answers a few days ago. So yeah.
That was a Bob Bradley team, wasn't it?
I believe it was. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to go the exact opposite weather-wise. I'm going to go with LA Orlando as the final.
And again, I can see a case for that.
That will be a warm. That will be a warm final. And I just, for the sake of you and people who like to taunt Orlando nonstop, which is a thing I always appreciate. I'm going to say that LAFC finally, after years and years of trying, decades of trying and failing, LAFC finally wins their first MLS Cup this year.
And I mean, what puts them over the top this year, do you think?
They've got all the talent in the world, right? So then, just to your point, which you've told me before about how the playoffs don't matter, If they get hot at the right time, they're the deepest squad in the league. And just the law of averages are that eventually it's going to work out to where the results match the talent.
Right. So you mean regular season doesn't matter, right? Not playoffs don't matter.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, the regular season doesn't matter. Only playoffs matter. The opposite of what I said.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, and with that, I mean, I think they're going to finish obviously enough to where they're going to get home matches, and hopefully we're going to be at the point of the season where we'd be able to have fans. And yeah, then you'd be able to see, you know, the LA fan base, which has been fantastic when they've been able to be in the stadium, and just have that electricity, and yeah, just see what that can do to kind of turn the energy and help. Because yeah, I mean, last year it was just CCL was super weird. I mean, it always is, but to have it in a completely empty stadium in Orlando was just, yeah, really, really, really bizarre. So,
hey Jeremiah, what was this Twitter question?
Oh,
I didn't want to set that up wrong because I wasn't sure what the context was there.
Well, the Twitter question is actually one from We Are Austin TV that they had for us when we did our live stream, but I thought it was a good question. That is, who is Austin's top goal scorer going to be? And we both said Danny Houston on Thursday. And I don't want to overreact to one preseason match, but I thought it would be good to ask Phil his opinion on that, and maybe we could give ourselves a chance to walk that back. So who do you see being in that spot, Phil?
I mean, it'd have to be Hosen, just because I see him as a system number 9, and I see what they're trying to do in terms of the teaching, in terms of how they're setting this up to work that system to get him a lot of chances. But it could be Dominguez. But I'm actually, I was thinking about this question a lot, actually. And since you had it on the last podcast, and I'm thinking either Mana or Redes are they're going to be near the top for goals per 90. I think they'll come on as impact subs a lot, or, you know, maybe Redes will start a game, go 60, and then they'll pull in, like, you know, Fagundes for the last 30 or something like that. And I could see them getting a lot of goals, for, you know, relative to their time on the field. But yeah, I mean, yeah, you would have to hope that that's Hosen, given the system and what they're trying to do and what they're trying to work, and the kind of idea of playing from the back, and you know, just the chance creation that they're trying to do, and some of the stuff that we've, you know, maybe didn't see in the game against Houston, but we've seen in some of the highlight reels in the USL warm-up games that they've had. But here's the weird X factor. LAFC has one DP spot left. Austin FC has one DP spot left. What if it's Sergio Aguero coming in mid-season?
I was actually going to say, I think there's a decent chance that the top goal scorer isn't on the team yet.
Right.
And it's whoever that DP is they bring in a couple of months into the season. If they bring in a number 9 or whoever it is, there's a good chance it's going to be on that attacking half, and might be the person that ends up scoring a lot of those goals. So whether or not it's Kun Aguero, do you think that's possible? Do you think that will actually happen, or could actually happen?
I think if he goes to MLS, I mean, obviously, you know, City Football Group, NYCFC's probably got a real good shot at him, given those connections. You know, but again, I mean, Claudio's got connections from his time there, so maybe there's enough there where that could work. I could also see LAFC be completely appealing, and they could just be this team of behemoths, this kind of, you know, Kevin Durant joins the Warriors kind of situation, where, you know, he joins them and they score 6-0 on everybody the rest of the way. That could certainly happen. But yeah, I mean, and again, it's getting to be less of a league where you can have European players late in their career come over and make huge impacts. But, you know, I still think he's got enough to where he could absolutely do that. I think he would wreck shop if he came here.
I agree. I agree that he would wreck shop if he came to MLS. I don't really think that he'll come to Austin. He is still going to be extremely expensive. He's making many millions of dollars per year, more than probably any other MLS player is or will make at that point in time. And I just don't like looking at Precourt's track record. I think he's going to spend more here than he did in Columbus, but I don't think he's going to spend Kun Aguero money.
So if you're an Austin FC fan and you want this to happen, buy more jerseys.
Like a lot, like buy 10 for everybody in your family.
Live at the Verde van. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like he's 32. I mean, he's not, if he comes here and succeeds, whether it's in Austin or not, I don't feel like it's reinforces the retirement league.
No, I don't either.
Because I think like every league in the world would love to have a guy like that that's been that good for that long, and so I think that's the challenge for MLS. It's like lots of places are going to want to have him and pay him a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Is there any other points that either of you guys wanted to hit before we wrap up?
I want Phil to pick his MVP. We don't spend a lot of time on it, but I want to know because this is going to be the thing I'm going to clip and taunt him about later. When it's so I want it on the record.
So I think I already said that, but let me hedge bets a little bit since you've given me a chance to do that. So I will say that if Reynoso has the form that he had in the playoffs this past year, he will definitely running away get it, unless Joseph Martinez has a monster season, comes back and scores in like the 25 to 30 goal range. But then also Carlos Vela is a good pick. So those are my three. So I dare anybody who is not Reynoso, Martinez or Vela to win MVP. So it'll probably be Zelarayan or something.
Zelarayan, Pozuelo could get some shots in there.
For sure.
But I think my two picks would be Reynoso and Vela for sure. I think seeing Reynoso just play a whole season is going to be really cool. And then Vela, I think if LAFC is going to be as good as we think they're going to be, he's going to have to be one of the guys to kind of pull that along. So
yeah, for sure.
I think one of those two. All right. Well, Phil, thanks so much for joining us. It's a pleasure every time. We'll try to have you back on again sometime soon. But where can our listeners find you?
Well, you can now find me on the strikertexas.com, and I'll be doing columns there every Friday, and we're talking about some other things that I might be doing, some kind of fun things to provide a kind of combination of insights as to matchups and things of that nature, and then there's also kind of fun, entertaining things as well, maybe even within the same articles. So just look for that. It's gonna evolve, and it's gonna be really fun, and it's gonna be a really cool vantage point for the season. And then I still will be doing some matches for MLSsoccer.com as well, so you can find me there. I am booked for opening weekend doing Nashville against Cincinnati. So I am back on the Nashville beat apparently. So, which I enjoy. It should be fun actually. I'm kind of curious to see how they're evolving. And then, also Cincinnati, that first game may answer some questions about how well the off season went for them. And then, just Phil West on Twitter is where you can find me, just having fun and responding to people and occasionally spotlight my own stuff.
All right. Awesome. Well, again, thanks so much for joining us, Phil. It's been a blast as always.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Thanks, man.
All right. We want to thank Phil West one more time for joining us. Before we wrap up, we would like to remind you to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. It will help our audience grow, expose us to more people, as more people started paying to Austin FC as the season approaches. If you want to continue the soccer conversation, you can find us on Twitter. I'm at LVAhero, and Jeremiah, you are at
JBentley_ATX.
We're always looking to connect with people, talk more about soccer, and you can find us on Twitter doing that most of the time. We also want to ask you to visit the Striker Texas website. What's an article they should look for, Jeremiah?
Well, one of the things we didn't have time to get into on the show today were all the local food vendors that were going to be involved in the stadium. And they're a lot. I'm very impressed.
It's a lot of them, right?
It's a lot of local restaurants. One of them I think is particularly interesting is Pluckers, because Phil West and Mark Bay from the Striker both have some kind of bet related to eating a bunch of wings. I don't know exactly what it is, but there's like a little Twitter fight between the two. So
I think it has to do with FC Dallas and Austin's finish in the table. Like if one finishes above the other, if Austin finishes above Dallas, then Mark has to do like the hottest hot wing challenge at Pluckers, and the other way around if Dallas beats Austin in the final table.
So you should, so that we love a good like Twitter food challenge, which will be recorded. Maybe we'll do like a Moon Tower live for that battle. But yeah, check that article out and kind of see what the club has going on at the stadium.
All right. Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode of Moon Tower Soccer. We'll be back in 1 week with more of the latest Austin FC news, including a review of the next match against FC Dallas. We're also going to have our friend and self-proclaimed soccer analyst Chris Wellhausen join us to do a preview of the LAFC match. And then we're also going to talk to Mike Craven, who is the Austin FC beat writer for the Austin American Statesman. Until then, my name is Landon Cottom.
I'm Jeremiah Bentley.
We'll catch you next time.